someone cares that you're alive, when someone finds the world in your eyes, there you know you found all you need. You'll hold this world's most priceless prize, the sweetest treasure in this life. If you can look back and know you were loved, you were loved by someone, touched by someone, held by someone, and something to someone, love somebody, touch somebody's heart along the way. You can look back and say, you were loved. So many roads that you can take, whatever way you go. Don't take that road alone, better you should know. You were loved by someone, touched by someone, held by someone, meant something to someone, love somebody, touch somebody's heart along the way. You can look back and say, you did okay. You were loved. So remember to tell that one you are loved. We all wanna make our place in this world. We all wanna make our place in this world. We all want our voices to be heard. Everyone wants a chance to be someone. We all have dreams we need to dream, but sweeter than every star you can reach is when you reach and find you found someone. You'll hold this world's most priceless thing, the greatest gift this life can bring. If you can look back and know you were loved. You were loved by someone, touched by someone, held by someone, meant something to someone, love somebody, touch somebody's heart along the way. You can look back and say, you were loved. You can have diamonds in your head, have all the riches in the land. Without love, do you really have a thing? When someone cares that you're alive, when someone finds the world in your eyes, there you know you found remember to tell that one you are loved. We all wanna make our place. We all wanna make our place in this world. We all want our voices to be heard. Everyone wants a chance to be someone. We all have dreams.
Oh, you just probably wake up on the stage dramatically. I've never been tripped over. I'm going to do this. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Always rely on Chuck's police. I'm Jim Fisher. I'm the interim provost and VP for academic affairs here at PennWest. For those of you who are members of the PennWest community, it's nice to see you here in Alexander Recital Hall. For those of you who are members of the community, thanks so much for being here. It's our privilege to have you. And for our friends on Zoom, it's also great to have you with us as well. It's my privilege to welcome you to the James Drane series, speaker series on religion and culture, and also welcome our speaker, Dr. Brian Adams, who is our 2025 speaker. I'm going to get off the stage as quickly as possible, but I'm going to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Roy Shin. Roy Shin has been a tireless advocate for the James Drane Speaker Series. He's a retired administrator, associate dean, and also a faculty member in the Department of Communication Sciences Disorders, and was a mentor to me when I first became an administrator. Taught me a lot of things about how to interact with people and get things done. Really appreciative of Dr. Shin for his great work at Edinboro University and PennWest. And he's also was a tireless, close personal friend to Dr. James Drane, and has been, again, a real advocate for his life's work continuing on here at PennWest University. So without further ado, Dr. Shin.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for attending this spring's lecture, especially with the lovely conditions that we have out there tonight. Either in person or on the live stream. We welcome all of you on the live stream as well. This is a special time of the year for several religions, and I want to welcome everyone in a true spirit of fellowship and goodwill. I want to also express my gratitude to the PennWest staff who helped make all of today's activities possible and enjoyable. Provost Fisher, Associate Dean Zimmerman, the Director of the Bioethics Institute, Dr. Ermesh, Dawn Dillon and Sheila Taylor from the Provost's office, Chris LaFuria from Communication and Marketing, and Brad Peters from Technology. It really takes a team to make anything work. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to share a few reflections on Dr. Drane. In the 23 years that Jim was a beloved professor of philosophy here, and the 25 years after that, that he continued to come to work daily as professor emeritus, but as the director of the Bioethics Institute here on campus. Students and faculty and coaches and staff and administrators, basically everybody knew him. And because Jim never met a stranger, never met anyone not worth loving. And he let you know it. So many of us were the beneficiaries of his passion for learning, generosity, kindness, sense of humor, encouragement, consolement, and wisdom. His experiences as a priest and as a teacher made him want to help anyone in need, including helping students discover their professional calling, rather than just relying entirely on random chance or high income potential or their parents' wishes. He knew how much easier it was to be committed to excellence and to ethical behavior when one felt that their chosen profession unveiled their own sense of purpose and trustworthiness. My professional background is in health professions, and I taught a graduate course for many years that included a large unit on professional ethics. Jim helped me to go deeper than just teaching the principles and rules of codes of ethics, and address why those rules were adopted by each profession, present challenging real-world scenarios they were likely to face, and strategies for maintaining independent ethical judgment and action that always held the welfare of their patients paramount. Many of us were blessed to know Jim for many years, but we still miss his presence since his death on April 17th, 2 days from now, 2 years ago, 2023. This lecture series on religion and culture that Jim established in 2018, along with the Bioethics Institute's lecture series, allows us to honor the memory of this kind and noble scholar and gentleman. It's now my honor to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Bryan Adams. His background in mediation and dialogue facilitation has promoted improved understanding and respect across a variety of religious, cultural, and organizational boundaries in a number of countries such as Australia, the United States, Canada, Azerbaijan, the UAE, the Sudan, Philippines, and Fiji. Dr. Adams was the director of the Center for Interfaith and Cultural Dialogue at Griffith University, a public university in Australia, from 2011 to 2020, where he addressed the contributions of religion in economy, law, community cohesion, media, business, politics, and sustainable development at numerous international conferences and organizations. During that time, he created the annual Interfaith Forum at the G20, which consists of about 20 countries, approximately, that represent approximately 2/3 of the population of the world, from 2014 to 18, and followed that in 2018 with the Commonwealth Interfaith Initiative, which is 56 countries. Since 2016, Dr. Adams has served as chair of the board of trustees of A Common Word Among the Youth, an international interfaith charity that develops skills in youth leaders to promote peace by increased understanding of different faith and cultures. I first learned of Dr. Adams after attending 2 panel discussions of diverse religious leaders from the Cincinnati area, where we both live, that he coordinated and moderated. I was moved by the respectful discussion that occurred while daily news reports at that time suggested impenetrable hostility existed between the religions they represented. Tonight, he will share his extensive experiences, including the successes and challenges he has faced in a lecture format. And that will be followed by a question and answer at the end. So I have passed out cards and pens for you to write those on. For those that are on the live stream, you can use the online chat. We'll read those out loud, and we'll also have a live microphone if you would rather do it that way here. He'll return in October to moderate a panel discussion of religious leaders from this region on various relevant topics, and your feedback tonight will help to plan that event. The intent will be to plant the seeds for building bridges of dialogue and goodwill across religious and secular individuals and groups, right here at PennWest. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Brian Adams.
Right, find everything. Here we go. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for that wonderful clapping, Mr. Scalise, as well. Some movies, when they're released, they'll actually hire people to go and sit in the audience and laugh and all of that for the movie. I think his job on the foundation is to come and clap and just get everybody else excited about the speaking. Is that right? You do it very well. And thank you so much for the welcome here. I do appreciate that you've allowed me to see all 4 seasons in one day. What happens here? So we've had sunshine and warm weather. We've had hail. We've had snow and rain. That pretty much covers it, isn't it? Am I missing anything? I guess football season. We haven't had that one yet today. That's the last one. But again, thank you for letting me be here. So a bit of a personal tie to not the topic, but the lecture series is when I was an undergraduate back in the 90s, I was a teacher's assistant for bioethics class for 3.5 of my 4 years at university. And whose name do you think appeared from time to time in all that we were discussing and studying? And I never once in my life thought I would actually be speaking at the university where he was based and where so much of this grew out of. So it's kind of a professional, warm moment for me. And it's very humbling to be able to be part of this. I'd like to thank Dr. Shin for this opportunity to come and be with you and to share these thoughts. But in particular, I would like to thank him for the integrity that he has in continuing to not just move forward, but to try to grow the vision that Dr. Drane had around this, and that he's not employed here anymore. This is truly his commitment to a wonderful man, a friend, and a mentor, but also his personal integrity. That's how I see it. And so I just want to thank you, Dr. Shin, for that. Can we please show our. So the overall thesis that I'll be addressing is that public universities have a vital leadership role to play in our communities. And it's vital for universities themselves, and it's vital for the communities in which they are leaders. And I will speak, almost all my examples when we get into the practical portion of the presentation are through engagement with faith communities and cultural communities. Pushing a button is not beyond my technological capacity, so I can do this. So a little bit about me. I'm from Arkansas, rural Arkansas. My family homesteaded Montgomery County in the southern end of the Ozarks, and that's where I'm from. But through fortune and a bit of stumbling around, I've had the great blessing to travel the world and to work internationally. And I've worked in either consulting or advising roles, or lived in a little over 40 countries around the world, on all the continents, very little in South America, just a little bit with the G20 when it was in Argentina, but in most other regions of the world. And it's been my life's work, my life's passion is engaging with these differences, bringing them together to have an impact on the lives of those who most need it. And I've been doing that for several decades now. Also, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we're known for having a lot of kids. So here's a picture. Oh, no, sorry. Let me get back to this first. I should follow my slides. That is beyond my technological capacity. We're going to be talking about tonight the why. Why should PennWest and public universities in general be engaging with interfaith issues and communities? We'll talk about the benefits of it. In so doing, we'll touch upon the what, like what do you do? And then I'll spend some time on the how, giving a framework for engagement to build trust that's needed, but also just some steps that will help grow this that I've learned from my own experience in building a center. So there you go. I said we have lots of children. Not everybody in this picture is my children. We don't have quite that many, but just the ones between this beautiful lady here with the glasses and whatever that thing is at the end of the aisle. Those right there. And here's a little clearer image of just who belongs to me as my daughter graduated from high school. The boys have shot up since then as they've hit that age. But yeah, that's my family. Carolyn is my wife, and then we have Celia, who graduated, and Sadie, and then Cyrus, Summer, and Soren. And yes, I hope you're taking notes because there is an exam at the end of this. So I have a PhD in political science, specializing in deliberative dialogue and conflict resolution. Worked as a mediator for a while and doing a number of things. Thank you for mentioning that I am the chair of the board of trustees for ACWay, a common word among the youth. This is a love of mine. I've been with them. We're now in our 10th year, and I've been with them from the start, not as the chair of the board, but as an advisor from the very beginning. And I just, I mean, I work at a university, that's where I am. I love working with that age group. And then to be able to do it in a leadership position and build the leaders around the world, that is just so much more enriching. And I am the founding director of what was once the Center for Interfaith and Cultural Dialogue. And I did that at a university that's called Griffith University. And it's a large public university in Queensland, Australia. And we had 5 campuses, about 35,000 students. It was a big one. And we had, but it was also quite a challenge to build a center that engaged deeply with religious and cultural communities on a public university campus. And how it began was they have in Australia, you see here N35 Multi-Faith Center. In Australia, they have what are called multi-faith centers. And this is a space on public university campuses where people of, the staff and students can go for their spiritual enrichment or retreat or whatever is needed for them. And it's a great idea. The challenge that I have with that is it's away from the university. It's not part of the university life. And so the university doesn't get much benefit from that learning or interaction that could take place. Nor do the students get the opportunity to share that aspect of their life on a secular public university campus. And so when I was hired, I was actually hired to manage this when I applied for the role. But I went in and I said, my interest isn't managing a space. That's not why I did a PhD in dialogue and conflict resolution. But what I think is important is the opportunity that the university has with a space like this. We have the conceptual and the physical space to be bridge builders, to convene important groups to address challenging issues in our communities. And they really liked that idea. And so, kudos to them. They hired me they started the hiring process without this idea, but they hired me to found this center and move that work forward. And I was there for 10 years until the two insurmountable things happened. COVID hit and we got a new president. So that's, as you know, things can change then. But what an opportunity it was. And this is, I'm not saying the work was hard, but this was me when I started. And that was me when I finished. So, you know, do you see any difference there? Not just the smile is no longer there either. No, I'm just kidding. It's it was wonderful work, but it was very, very challenging. So why should public universities in particular engage with their local communities? And there are two categories of responses that I would put forward, and we're just going to touch upon these kind of briefly, at least the first few. The categories are, the first one is a moral argument. There's a moral argument for this to take place. And then the second category are more the practical arguments. So love our academic robes, don't we? That's an important part of us. Well, that's part of the moral argument that I want to make. So, and that is that universities should return to an ambition to fulfill the historic role that they have as community leaders. So traditionally, as in my reading of history, and this truly is history from Brian's perspective, in my reading of history of universities, medieval universities granted three robes. They were ecclesiastical, academic, and juridical. And these robes meant something. First of all, and probably easiest to recognize, is they indicated mastery of their profession or their field. But in addition to that, those who wore these robes were meant to be, and often accepted broadly by the community, as leaders, as public leaders, whose authoritative voices in society and the public sphere could speak to things like politics, economics, moral conduct even, so on and so forth. And so having been conferred these robes gave one this moral authority in our society. And so universities aren't simply to produce the next generation of workers or scholars or whatever, but they're producing leaders, but they are also leaders themselves. And that perhaps we've gotten away from that a bit in our modern era. So looking at this, that's kind of the moral argument that I put out there, but there's also some practical arguments. One of them is self-preservation. So this is Professor Danielle Allen of Harvard University, and I'm going to quote two very recent statements in relation to this idea. She said just this weekend, 2 days ago, she wrote an article in The Atlantic titled, "America and its Universities Need a New Social Contract." She wrote, "The future of the nation's universities is very much at stake. This is not a challenge that can be met with purely defensive tactics. We must do what should have been done long ago. Find our way to a new social contract between universities and the American people." A big part of her argument, she takes it in a bit of a different direction, but we still have the same general thesis, is that post-World War II and the Vannevar Bush report, it kind of established two norms in our academic communities. One was academic freedom, and the other was scientific autonomy. But along with these two norms, there arose also a belief that scientists, or researchers in general, conducting their research, did not need to think about their responsibility to society. Instead, in fact, this was something that Dr. Drane pushed back against quite strongly in his work. Instead, they would produce research and publish the results, and then industry or government could take those results, think about society, and translate the research into socially beneficial applications. So for her to build this new social contract, she says, universities need to do more to build the kind of trust that provides a solid foundation for public support. And then just last week, Peter Hans, the president of the University of North Carolina system, when he was speaking to the University of North Carolina's Board of Governors, he said, "I believe higher education has been and remains an enormous source of strength for our state and nation." Amen to that, absolutely. But the public confidence in higher education nationally has fallen. And so part of my argument, part of the value that I find in making a presentation like this is that this trust that they're calling for will come as we step into our historical role as community leaders. And I'll speak more specifically about how to build that trust later on. But that's the underlying argument here. But also, there's a second practical argument. And this is what I saw at the Multi-Faith Center, in the Multi-Faith Center at Griffith University. It's that universities are uniquely positioned to add value on issues of broad importance. And let me show you a somewhat abstract example. It'll be abstract now, but then I'll show you how we applied it later on. And this is in the Countering Community Division framework that we developed at my center. Now, we developed this in response to the strong push in countering violent extremism that was a main theme of government policymaking and university research in, for the previous 10 years. But it was having some adverse impacts on community, creating quite a bit of division. So we, being a center that tries to bridge these divides, came up with this policy framework that we call Countering Community Division. And what we did was we researched in the literature what the general drivers are of extremization, and we began to categorize those. So we have the environmental or the external drivers. These are the big picture things, right? We then did the social drivers and grouped them as well. These are the things with which we interact fairly regularly or often. And then finally, the individual drivers, our cognitive and emotional experiences that drive this decision-making along this path of extremization. And we began to use it as a mapping exercise. And so this particular presentation was put together for the United Nations, addressing some issues around hate speech, but it still illustrates what the point I want to make here. And so we had things like diplomats. They would work at the external level, right? Politicians could work at two levels, social and external, in various capacities. Civil society leaders work at a closer level, individual and social. Religious leaders could work at different points along all three of these, as do our beloved scholars. Now, this is what the mapping exercise looked at. And the purpose of this exercise was to, one, take a very, very broad, complex issue and try to make it a whole of society response to this issue. But to make it a whole of society response to an issue, we had to also know what parts of society could respond to what parts of the challenge, and then map out who those are and where they would be. And from that point, we could then identify potential partners for dialogue and project work and collaboration. But the point I want to make that's very specific to this presentation is, if you look at scholars and religious leaders, they're the only actors in our mapping exercise that are across all three levels of the drivers of extremization that we found in our research. So what that means is they are conceptually the best bridge builders for addressing this whole issue. And it's that scholar one that I think is an important part of, or hits home the point that I want to make is this second practical argument, is that universities are uniquely positioned to address major issues that concern broad society. We're uniquely positioned to build bridges that address very, very, very big questions, such as the rise of violent extremism. Okay, so we've that's kind of the quick why. Now we're going to look at some of the benefits. And Roy, you're helping me keep time, right? Because like my kids, if I get to talk about my kids, I'll go on forever. The same with this topic here. So if I see you, by the way, if I see you doing this, I'll assume you're agreeing with me and encouraging me to keep going on. Okay, so just warning you right now. So what are some of the benefits? I'll go through some quickly and others will perhaps spend a bit more time on. And please note these and feel free to ask questions for greater details later. But one of them is student recruitment. Engaging with faith communities in a respectful manner, collaborative, partnership way, can strengthen international and local student recruitment. It's an opportunity to differentiate our university from others who will struggle to face these challenges, but also faculty recruitment and retention. This is a very important issue that universities are challenged with right now as well. One example I can give from my work, and I'll show a picture later on about this, is Australia is the major economy in the Pacific region. And so therefore we attract a lot of Polynesians to Australia. But there is a broad cultural disconnect between Western university higher education systems and the cultural traditions and mores of Polynesian people. And so our center was part of an initiative to attract Polynesian students, like Samoans, for example. Within them, there are two things that are important to them. I mean, there's lots, of course, but that universities scare them broadly about. One is they're very religious communities. Their religious leaders hold a lot of sway. And many of them don't want to be challenged in their leadership by other thinking and therefore aren't super encouraging of it. And two, their culture is very important. They don't want to lose their songs and their cultures and their structures. And universities are a threat to that, is how it's often seen. But having a center that engages with faith and culture on a university campus was actually heartening, even liberating for many of them. And as we worked closely with them, we could strengthen their understanding of and desire to attend the public university. The next benefit is donor support. So I'm choosing two people who became very interested in the work of the center that would not have been interested in being involved in Griffith University without the work of the center. So, but again, with donor support, as many of you know, it's a strategic question as well. It's not just, hey, anybody, come give us money. I mean, not if you're trying to maintain any system with integrity and follow the values that you have at your university. So I want to highlight that it is a very strategic question as well. But it broadens the base. And as a bit of advice also, I wouldn't encourage thinking you can lean on religious groups as donors. They often don't have much, but also it can be interpreted as very biased, the work that you're doing, which can interfere with the broader engagement with other faith communities. But looking at individuals and foundations in this space can be very fruitful. One of the people that I want to highlight is Maha Sinnathamby. So he was Australian, originally from Sri Lanka, but he came to Australia and he built the largest planned development called Springfield Lakes in Queensland in Australia. $1 billion development, huge, with a man with enormous vision. And we had worked with him. He was of Hindu background, and we had worked with him on doing some projects around Gandhi's teachings around satyagraha and non-violent protestation and building peace in communities. And then when the Commonwealth Games came, we established a dialogue platform, a conference, launching it with a conference on sustainable peace and development in the Commonwealth. So for those who would like to know, the Commonwealth is broadly the remains of the British Empire. Now countries that are semi-autonomous but still recognize the head of the British monarchy as the head of state in general. So countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, so on and so forth are part of the Commonwealth. And we wanted to say, look, given the challenges that are facing the international system, China's rise and its desire to replace the Bretton Woods institutions, for example, we need some other leadership happening. At the time, this was in 2018, the US administration was pulling back from the UN and World Bank and other issues as well. So giving China that opportunity and that space. So we wanted to promote the possibilities of the Commonwealth stepping into this space. So having worked with Maha for a while now, he saw this as something he wanted to get behind. This is important. India and Sri Lanka are also members of the Commonwealth. And he saw this as having, for him, religious, cultural, important ties and a great contribution he can make. So that's just one example of a donor who would not have been involved with our university without a center like this. The next, his name is Yusuf Adi. Lulu is his name, is his nickname. Those that know him well, we call him Lulu, which in Swahili means pearl. So I think that's a lovely name. But he's from Kerala, India, which is southwestern India. And he's a Muslim gentleman who made his fortune in the Middle East, starting out building, providing stores for the Pakistani Indian diaspora that's in the Middle East, mainly as workers. He recognized, hey, there's a huge market here. I'm going to build supermarkets for them. But I got to know him because of some collaborations in India, in Kerala, India, with the Madin Academy. I'll show you a picture of that in a little bit as well. And he's from that area, and he was already active in supporting the building of Hindu temples, Christian churches, and helping in other Muslim masjids, but helping with blind and other disabilities in Kerala. And so we knew each other from that work. And that drew his attention to the work of the center and wanting to donate as well. So having this type of engagement can attract donors who normally would not have a connection with or an interest in the university. Now, the next area that is a benefit to a public university from engaging with faith communities is in research. And two examples I'll give. One is this one here. So this is part of a series and kind of laying the foundation for some of the work we began to do around climate change response in the Pacific. As I just mentioned a little bit ago, many Pacific Islanders the communities are very religious. And so for them to have, USAID or AusAid or New Zealand Aid or GTZ, Germany come in with their experts, right? And they are, or specialists, as I like to say, would come in and say, here's some frameworks and some models and some things you can do to respond to the climate change that's taking place. It would not go very well. And so we began to advocate for, how about if you engage with the religious communities, the structures that are there, to disseminate information, to gain legitimacy in the arguments you're making, and to change minds, because currently there's a very strong pushback against this, saying, if we do this, how does that demonstrate our faith in being saved? And so trying to develop messaging and communication around these lines. Dr. Nunn at Gold Coast University is heading that up. But this is something that our university wouldn't have been able to engage in and have that type of impact without a center like this. And it would not then have the benefit of, strengthened reputation in this area. Another research project was around Aboriginal literacy. So Aboriginal Australians are a very disadvantaged community in Australia. There is a much higher rate of youth incarceration and adult incarceration, much higher rate of health challenges, somewhat similar to challenges we see amongst Indigenous Americans here, lower rates of employment, higher poverty rates. And so there was a researcher at Griffith University, an Aboriginal Indigenous man, and we began to look at what is the tie between religiosity or religious practice and literacy. Because there began to be a strong push in Aboriginal communities to break free of some of the trappings of the early colonialism, and that included Anglican and Catholic churches, which originally were the foundation for education for Australia, the colonies in Australia. And we began to have some preliminary data that were supporting the idea that as they pulled away from churches and religiosity, their literacy began to drop, a strong correlation there. And the hypothesis was because they don't, they're not reading scriptures in the home as a family like they once was a practice amongst them. They're not getting that that exposure at regular basis at church, and they're not attending schools at the rate that other Australian children are. Unfortunately, he got headhunted to another university, so we didn't get to finish leading us in that direction. That was so frustrating. But it still was a great opportunity to have a great impact on communities and understanding, but would not have happened if we didn't have a center that engaged with these issues. Or initiatives. It doesn't have to be a center, but initiatives that engage with those. So that's research. In other words, you can address or ask questions that aren't easily approached, and you can have entree into communities that would normally be inaccessible. Another one that's very important for public universities is this idea of partnerships and bridge building. So this is just one demonstration. That's the Dalai Lama speaking at the St. Stephen's Cathedral, Catholic Cathedral. We have a Hindu seated next to an Orthodox Jew, seated next to the abbess of the Foganshan Buddhist monastery, seated next to a Muslim cleric, an Imam, Muhammad Abdallah, that's his name, a friend of mine. And this is possible. Oh, and there we have the Archbishop, the Catholic Archbishop as well. And this is possible because of the partnerships that we worked over years to build. And have any of you been in a situation where you could take a picture like this? This is rather unique. There aren't many. Oh, I would love to hear about that. And a picture like this takes a lot of work to be able to get to, and wouldn't happen if we didn't have partnerships and trust built up between them. So another partnership. This is the Mahdim Academy in Kerala, India. They like to do things really, really flashy there. They actually gave me that banner. How am I going to take this home back to Australia? It was huge. And this is the group to whom I was speaking. A lot of their students. It's an incredible organization, but it raised the reputation of the university in parts of the world that we had no access to, and would not have been able to access if we weren't engaging with these issues. These are this is at Oman, Muscat, Oman, in the Ministry of Religious Affairs in Oman, which in Muslim majority countries, especially in the Middle East, it's not just when we say Ministry of Religious Affairs, I'm not just saying they're in charge of religious affairs. It's a department that it's a ministry that's, has its hand in international relations, economic development issues, intercommunity relations, all of that. I mean, it's more than what it seems like when you just say the name. And we built some great collaborations with them. And I love Oman, by the way. It's such a fabulous country. Burkina Faso, we had did some work there. We trained traditional and local religious leaders on conflict resolution strategies and techniques, skills. And this was the team. You can probably find me in that picture pretty quickly. Kaohsiung, Taiwan. This is the headquarters of the Foguanshan Buddhist order. They're an international movement and great collaborators. We did lots of work with them. This is the Nile in Khartoum, in Sudan, where we had an Akwe conference with our youth, but also advised the Ministry for Youth while we were there. And just so you'll see what it's like. Riding a camel. I would be riding a camel. Hot and windy desert. Do you hear my brilliant David Attenborough style commentary there as well? Thank you, Roy. And these are ancient Meroitic temples that predate many of those we think of in Egypt as well, all through the Nile. It ran. So that's another benefit to universities is you get to ride a camel in a sense. This is Myanmar addressing some of the challenges with the that are ongoing there in a multi-faith capacity. Indonesia, we started to do quite a bit of work there. So that's some of the partnerships and bridge building that can take place and where you can go with it. But there's also an important getting back to the place of the university itself. There's an important convening capacity. So I mentioned earlier the Multi-Faith Center. It provided the physical as well as conceptual space to bring people together from different backgrounds, right? To be a bridge builder. So we did many different things. We had cultural celebrations. We had, so this one, for example, had Baha'i, Sikh, Orthodox Jewish, Lutheran, pagan, Shia Muslim, Hare Krishna, Sufi Muslim, Hindu, Latter-day Saints representatives at our event. This was a community iftar, which is the closing dinner during Ramadan, during the fast at the end of the day, that hosted the Queensland Police Commissioner, the Member of Parliament for policing, as well as many other faith leaders and representatives from Muslim communities. That's me trying to take a selfie. My skills have improved totally since then. This is a multi-faith dialogue training and ideas development, trying to build community across different faiths. This is cultural events we held. So this, I mentioned earlier Samoans, for example, trying to engage with Polynesian communities. We hold events like this that were very important for them to feel that they had a place where their culture was respected and even valued. Women's interfaith discussions. We have Runit, Jewish, the Abbas, and Muslim representatives speaking together. And then what's closest to my heart, Akwe youth conferences as well. So these are some of the other benefits. Now, the final benefit that I want to talk about is impact. And so I'm returning to this countering community division framework. I'll have two examples that I'll share here. So this is one. So how we ended up using this framework was in a number of ways. One was locally at the city level. So the city of Logan, which is I think the 8th largest city in Australia, asked us to come and help them evaluate and restructure their welcoming strategies. They're a very multicultural city, and they were struggling with how do we engage with various communities and people who are already there working within these issues. So we use this as a mapping exercise to address, what is missing in your welcoming? What are you not recognizing as important? So that was one very, very powerful way we did it. A second was at the state level. So the Queensland government established what they call, in a very wonderful government way, the Queensland Social Cohesion Consultation Committee. Let me see. Queensland Social Cohesion. It was some long name. Anyways, they tried to please everybody and that nobody got. But and what they ended up doing was using our model as the framework for the work that they did. When they were identifying what grants were needed, where should they target the grants, they used our model, which was, what a great thing for a university center to be able to do. And then finally, I mentioned earlier, the United Nations, their commission on the responsibility to protect and I should have written it down. Anyways, the UN Commission in that space, we use this to help understand how to address issues of hate speech and rising violence in different jurisdictions around the world. So we had impact at a number of different levels from the work that we were doing and engaging in. And the last impact example is one that I have to say I'm most proud of, because it seemed to bring together everything that I've been trying to build for almost 10 years. It all came together with this. And this is around COVID. So this is the cover page for the Queensland government's policy on COVID policy implementation in places of worship. And you'll notice it has the state government and our center's logo, our university and our center's logo on the same page, which is great for the suits at the university. They love to see this, right? You want to see your university doing something awesome. And that was good. And as the director of the center, I of course want my center's logo there. But I want to show you what was super important to me. And look at the list of those. So you'll see, produced by the Center for Interfaith and Cultural Dialogue, Recital University, in consultation with, and then we have this long list of different faith communities and faith-based organizations that contributed to it. And there's Orthodox Catholic, there is Anglican, two different groups of Anglican, which is very important as well, actually. The Buddhist Council, then there's the Buddhist Lights International Organization, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Go Forward Karenni Church, which is a Polynesian evangelical movement, the Meditation Center, which is kind of a Dharmic meditation group, Hindu Society, International Network of Churches is a Pentecostal group, if I remember correctly, Islamic Council, so on and so forth. We went down through this, Jewish, various Muslim, all of this. Many of these are people who would never come together in a dialogue. In the past, certainly not. But we were able to, because of the work that we did over a number of years, bring them together at a time of major crisis in Australia. And it had powerful impact. And what I mean is, So what the genesis behind this was, I wrote an opinion piece in which I said, if Australian government is serious about COVID policy implementation, they have to take faith-based communities on board as partners. And of course, I had my argumentation there, demographic and other reasons why. And someone in the government listened, read it. And they came out and they asked us to, I have 5 minutes left, or 15, okay. And they said, Brian, can your center help us work with the faith communities to find out what issues we need to know to write policy in this space? And I said, yeah, we'll do it, but I have one stipulation, is that they be partners on it. It's not just us asking them questions and then we go and write or whatever, we decided to do. And they agreed to it. So we did an initial consultation, and then they came back and said, okay, that is great. Can you write the policy paper? And I said, we will, but there's this one stipulation. And so we had people from a wide range of faith communities with the chief medical officer of Queensland, with a representative from the governor's office as well, all of us working together to write this policy paper that was then adopted by the state government. That saved lives. We had the highest rate of compliance with policy in the entire country that other states struggled to address, and then it ended up adopting this. They didn't have as much success because they didn't have the process of building and respect that went behind creating it, but they still had something that helped them know how to address these issues. And to me, that is the impact that I wanted my center and my university to have. So that's what I'm talking about in the potential impact that this kind of work could have. So we've looked at why, we looked at some of the benefits. We could spend some time on what, but I realize there are people here who are a lot smarter than I am, who have much greater understanding of the context at PennWest University. So I don't think you would benefit from me telling you what you should do. Well, hopefully I've triggered some reflection that, if it's something you want to take up and move forward, that this is what you could do. And I'll leave you with that. But what we'll do is we'll go to the how. And I want to give you some steps that I developed, or that I now recognize were important to take to do this, and then I'll leave you with a framework on this. So this model for engagement. First of all, have a vision. Know what you're trying to do. So there are models that are out there in the US. There's one university where the president said every department, every faculty has to have some social impact component to their work. And I want to see what that is. So that's one model. Another has shaped their social engagement, their community engagement around a theme, ending hunger. And so they have all kinds of initiatives, policy, education, community organizing, community development around ending hunger. At Griffith University, it was the Center for Interfaith and Cultural Dialogue to address a broad range. So have a vision. How would this vision fit with President Anderson's vision for the university, for example? Or how would it inform the vision that's being developed? For us at the Center for Interfaith and Cultural Dialogue, our vision was we wanted to build respect through understanding. So that meant we did things like we dialogued rather than debated. We celebrated rather than proselytized. And so our vision shaped what we did. But it also gave us an opportunity to say, well, that's valid, but that's not what we do, because this is our vision. This is what we're trying to do. So try to have a clear vision. Second, start with what you have. We couldn't have started with the COVID policy implementation. We had to start with this building that we had and its little director and admin officer, right? I think, for example, here at PennWest, we have this lecture series and Dr. Shin's ideas for this. This is a good place to start. Mercyhurst collaboration could be also something that helps build in this direction. which relates to the next one, partner with others. We don't need to go it alone. In fact, all right. Sorry about that. I think I used one too many fingers. I'm not really sure what happened there. Yeah, find strong partnerships. What we did at the center, at the ICD, the Center for Interfaith and Cultural Dialogue, is I treated the center a bit like an NGO, in that I partnered with a lot of community organizations that were already out there doing things. And this had a number of benefits. One, it gave us entree to communities that we didn't have. Two, it immediately increased our visibility and our reputation in the community as a legitimate supportive partner. But at the same time, it strengthened them. You know, so many community groups are doing great work. They just don't have the resources, either human or financial or technological, to do this. And when they partnered with us, I could then justify in my budget that my staff would work on, you know, promotion, or that we could connect them with a specialist at the university that worked in a space that could help them out. And so it was this wonderfully mutually beneficial relationship that grew the university's impact very rapidly. The next is grow support. Oh, I may have done something else. Thank you, Brad. Something deceptively simple. Grow support. So, for example, we built relationships with the Queensland Police Service, the local member of Parliament, who happens to now be the Treasurer for Australia, and the likely successor to Anthony Albanese as the Prime Minister of Australia. Grow it in terms of donors as well. Another one is respond dynamically. And what I mean is, it's great to have a vision, it's great to have a strategic plan, but things are going to come up that there's no way you could have thought of. And what do you do when that happens? Well, for us, a couple things that came up was the G20 chose Australia to host its conference in 2014. And we thought, hey, here's an opportunity for us to really take a big step forward. Because it just so happens so the G20 is a collection of the 20 largest economies in the world. And they have an agenda that they will discuss and debate and try to come to some form of consensus on. And in the consulting process, they have a whole alphabet soup of consultative groups. Like you have the business 20, the B20, or the C20 for civil society, or the Y20 for youth, or the L20 for labor, or the W20 for women, so on and so forth. But they didn't have a faith 20. And I said, you know, that's a big driver of economic decision making. There's people's religious beliefs. How about if we provide this for them? And so we used the G20 as a platform for an interfaith dialogue, where we brought people from a broad range of backgrounds, religious as well as professional, to produce policy recommendations that we submitted to the G20. And that's been ongoing ever since. This year it's in South Africa. So we responded dynamically to that. That drove, I mean, we did some amazing things. We were able to get into the G20 communique in Argentina, faith-based approaches to human trafficking and how to address that. That was one really big success that we had. But we had other things in terms of impact, like in Argentina, for example, the vice president of the country of Argentina, she and I opened the G20 Interfaith Conference for that. I mean, I got to speak on stage with the vice president of a G20 country. So respond dynamically, but also proactively build institutions. And here's what I would like to do. I may need some more help, Brad. I hit escape, I think he told me.
And they're popped up on that secondary screen right there for you.
Oh man, good. They don't pay you enough. Oh, was my mic on for that? And so two institutions that we built, one very local and one international. One of them was the Queensland Faith Communities Council, and this was a peak interfaith body for the state of Queensland, where we had, when we started, we started with 14, it's grown since then, but 14 different faith-based communities coming together to be the point for any media inquiries, any government inquiries, any faith community. I mean, right now, if I were to ask you, to whom would you go in Pennsylvania if you had questions about different faith communities or interfaith work? Roy? Maybe? Father, you think, you know?
I go to my bishop and
And
it goes to the Holy See.
yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know how well the Holy See would be able to tell you how interfaith works in Pennsylvania. But we created a body that could do that, and then became that group. And then, of course, so that's at the state level, but then internationally, we have the G20 Interfaith Forum that I mentioned, where we've done it in Australia, in Turkey, in China, in Germany, in Argentina, in Japan, in Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. Every year it goes on to another country. And so be proactively building institutions. Don't wait for the right organization to be there to do the work that needs to be done. Find a way to build it. All right, love that, man. Oh, was that on my mic as well? Yeah. So we have a vision, start with what you have, partner with others, grow support, respond dynamically, proactively build institutions, and then finally, have clear principles. This isn't the same as vision. These are the principles that you adhere to. The vision will help articulate what these principles are, but don't let that be what drives your work alone. And so I want to share the framework that we developed at the center for engaging, building trust, building respect between different organizations. And I call it the CURE framework. And CURE stands for courage plus understanding can lead to respect. So that's where the CURE comes from. The CURE also comes from Australia, by the way. Now, so what are these principles? There are two aspects to it. If we want to engage with someone or a different group, that automatically means there are at least two partners in there. There's yourself and there is the other. So what can we do to help ourselves engage respectfully and build this respect, but also what can we do to draw them in? So the first one I call courage. And courage is made of two principles that we use to shape our work. One, bravery. Do stuff that isn't easy. Do stuff that isn't comfortable. Engaging with another organization, another person who is clearly very different from you is very challenging. Engaging with an issue that perhaps makes you uncomfortable is very challenging. But there's a whole lot more behind this. I'm just brushing across the top of it. But bravery consistently maintained and expressed is what makes courage. And I think the thing that best supports that consistent application of bravery is integrity, knowing who you are and what you are trying to do. It's not just a sense of righteousness in what you're doing. That's not what I'm saying. It's being consistent with the values that are you. That will allow you to maintain that bravery to turn it into courage. But you also want to understand the others. And it's this understanding that will help draw them in to want to collaborate with you. Excuse me. And two principles that help strengthen understanding. The first one is curiosity. Now, curiosity is very powerful in building respectful environment, respectful collaboration. Because what you're doing, remember, we're looking at it from a perspective of a public university. These are powerful institutions filled of very elite, powerful people. Is that right? Is that how you feel at the university as well? Especially, yeah, that's right. Well, anyways, community would see in that way, broadly. And so there needs to be some way to readjust that power differential that's often taking place between a community group, poorly funded, poorly staffed, poorly resourced, and a university, the big one in the region. But showing that you are interested in what they have, what they can teach you, what they can bring, is very affirming and leveling in terms of that power relationship. It attracts them, in other words, for a number of reasons. And the other one is humor. This work isn't easy. Sometimes you need to celebrate the successes that you have. Sometimes you need to recognize that you really messed it up and laugh it off or find some way to work through. But also humor, it's a psychological cheat code. You can talk about things that if you're using humor, you would not be able to talk about otherwise. You actually have physiological reactions when humor is taking place that opens your mind up, relaxes your body, and makes you more willing to listen and receive information that would normally challenge you. Humor as well, it's a cultural universal in that every cultural group has its own form of humor. But at the same time, it's a cultural differentiator. They have their own type of humor. And as you engage with that humor, you're actually showing, I get what you guys are about. And I accept it, and I'm trying to be part of that at the same time. So humor, it sounds like a fun thing, but it's actually incredibly rich, very important in building this environment of respect that they would want to then share what is important to them with you to build from and to grow from. And so, excuse me, that's the final thought I want to leave with you. That as PennWest University explores this possibility of strengthening its interfaith engagement, that as it does it with bravery and integrity, that as it engages with others with sincere, humble curiosity and humor, that it will develop this relationship of respect with its partners in all levels of society and have some tremendous benefits to the university and the community. And I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak with you.
Right, is my mic on?
Yep.
Okay. So we have an opportunity now for questions and responses. Chris, do you have anything on online? Any chat questions? Can we hear Chris, or is he in here?
We're now going to collect some questions from online. So
Okay, well then we'll start here.
okay, thank you.
Does anybody need a card and a pen to write with? Or you can come to them, I can share the microphone with you. So if you have questions, why don't you send them this way? And I'll collect those and read them.
Chris, do we have an idea of how many are on Zoom and from where? Just so we can know here as well.
We have 9 on Zoom right now, and the other one's on YouTube.
Oh, cool. We're on YouTube. My kids might even see this. Well, welcome everybody.
All right, we'll start with a question. How does interfaith engagement help me to better meet my future students' needs?
Oh, yeah, that is great. I love that question. It'll benefit at least 2 ways that I've seen myself. So I'll speak from experience here. I don't know who said this, and I can't tell you exactly for you, but for me, it helped in a couple ways. One is it gave me a bit of, I guess, conceptual flexibility. As I've learned to work with a number of other groups, I find that it's easier to work with other groups as well. It's like learning a language. If you've learned a second language, it's not that that language becomes easier, but your capacity to learn that, the skills that you have are increased, and you're able to learn that third language or that fourth language. And that's the same with the more different you engage with, and you begin to develop the skills to understand and see that, it's going to help you as you do that. Second of all, it's going to give you confidence as a teacher. You know that you can work with this. You know that you can help these students, even if you don't know who they are yet. But when they come from you, you'll know that because your experience will already tell you that you can do that. And so those are two of the ways that I have found that it has helped me as a teacher.
Okay, Chris, anything at your end?
Yes, we have one question. When you're working with different backgrounds and when you're doing this interfaith approach, what are some techniques that you use to make sure that you have a variety and a diversity of backgrounds so that we have different voices from different religions, different denominations, different countries? You've exhibited that through your work in other countries, but if you're at a, say, for example, a small rural college population, or you're in if you're in a location that doesn't really offer the best source of diversity, what are some steps that you can take to make sure that all the appropriate voices are heard from?
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do. First of all, I would say you're never going to get every diverse situation possible. If you want it to be practical and achieve something, you're not going to have every possible voice up. So, for example, one time we had a panel of 3 presenters. I think it was responding to, so these were academics responding to a book that had been written. So a bit of a book review, but using that to drive our interfaith discussion. So our 3 panelists were from 3 different countries, 3 different faith backgrounds, 3 different academic disciplines, and they all spoke, their native languages were different. So we had ethnic, national, religious, linguistic, professional diversity. But we had some people who criticized us because it just so happened that all 3 of those were men, and we didn't have women represented. And it's legitimate. I mean, it's valid, of course, but I thought, you know, it just so happened we just couldn't do everything, and you can't at every time. So don't kill yourself in trying to do that. Now, if every event we ever had, every dialogue we ever did, only had men, yeah, that'd be a big problem. And hopefully you're not doing that you're shuffling around and trying to get different voices and perspectives and not just sticking with the same kind of thing from time to time. But another bit of advice I would give is be clear on what you're trying to achieve. Is the event meant to look really diverse, and that's what you're trying to achieve? That actually happens quite often in interfaith dialogue. I remember for 3 years straight, the premier of Queensland wanted my help in bringing together a diverse panel of faith leaders for an interfaith ceremony on Australia Day. And really what they were wanting was, a panel who looked and dressed differently and had different background, but they weren't wanting them to do anything other than kind of participate in a show. And my pushback each time, until they finally stopped asking me to do it, was, look, these are immensely connected, intelligent people who could contribute a lot more than just their fancy dress and that they look different. Let's actually use this as an opportunity to dialogue with them and demonstrate Australian values of mateship and collaboration across faiths. 1 year they accepted it, the other 2 they didn't. But be sure on what you want to achieve, and that will help shape those that you want to have there. I mean, and be realistic about what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to say, I want to demonstrate that Edinboro is culinarily as diverse as New York City, maybe you've kind of just overstretched what might be possible there. But there's some good food here, by the way. We're going to show. But so those are 2 things. Don't try to get every bit of diversity every single time, but let what you're trying to achieve drive who the participants are and what the contribution is. Those are a couple of things.
Okay, next question. If a religious person believes another person's religion is wrong, are they
Yeah.
morally obligated to, I'm not sure, that to attempt to, it says convert them, but maybe it meant correct them?
Yeah.
I'm not sure the
Let-
context, if this is
let-
a classroom, but.
Yeah, that's right. And that would matter a lot. But let me answer it in perhaps a different way than what maybe they were asking with that question. So as many faith communities are, these aren't monoliths, right? A Catholic isn't the same as every other Catholic. A Latter-day Saint is not the same as every other Latter-day Saint, right? These are, and then when we're talking broadly, like Christianity or Islam or Judaism, these are hugely, ancient, widely diverse traditions. So not every single person is going to be the representative of that tradition. So recognize that. If you are ever faced with someone who thinks you're wrong, or don't think that, oh, their whole faith thinks I'm terrible, or so allow them that bit of grace, if I can say that. But also within these traditions, mine own included, you have a broad range of ideas, and almost every faith tradition that I know, there are a few that in which I found no exceptions to this, and they're pretty remarkable. But almost all will have those who think engaging with any other faith is sleeping with the enemy. Why do you want to talk to those heretics? We are religiously obligated to learn of them and strengthen ties with them. All within the same tradition, right? So I am sometimes challenged by people within my own tradition as to, why are you doing this? Or people from other traditions that think they know mine say, you clearly aren't, really tied into your community, because you wouldn't be doing interfaith dialogue if you were like, the real ones in your faith. But for me, interfaith dialogue is, it's like learning a foreign language. Now, you probably have picked up, and some of you know, I love foreign languages, and there is a correlation here. So when I learned French, I didn't suddenly say, you know what, English is the stupidest language in the world. In fact, I'm not going to speak English anymore. I'm just going to get rid of that thing. I'm only going to speak French. Of course not. In fact, what happened was, I had a lot of, wow, I didn't think of it that way. But now that I'm engaging in the French language, I can see things a bit differently. Look at these doors that have opened to me that would not have been there if I hadn't learned French. And at the same time, oh, so that's what subjunctive means in English. Or I understand my language better because I've learned a foreign language. And that's the same with my tradition. Yes, it can be challenging. Wait, they believe very strongly for the exact same reasons I believe very strongly. What? Or, I've never thought of sacraments in that way, or what repentance means, or forgiveness, or whatever. I've become a better Christian, a better member of my own faith community, because I have engaged and learned respectfully from others. So that's something that I try to make clear. You're not threatened unless growth and becoming better at who you are threatens you. That's what interfaith dialogue will do.
Chris, anything at your end?
We have covered all the questions that were submitted.
Thank you. My name's Ed Shank. I'm the pastor of the Methodist Church just off campus.
Yeah.
And before I came here, I had the privilege of being involved for 8 years with the Monroeville Interfaith Ministerium.
Where?
Monroeville, Pennsylvania,
Oh,
right outside of Pittsburgh, and there's a lot of interfaith.
Let's take note of that
there. And I can help you with resources.
Yeah,
I've got some connections through there. But just a couple of things, if I might, that it was an immense benefit. And having a college that would have been involved was helpful. In Monroeville, we have all kinds of different faith traditions. And I didn't have much background in that. So one of the things I wanted to do is I did this class called Understanding the Religions of Monroeville. I was part of the interfaith ministerium, and I asked if they would help me with that. And I brought some materials from my faith tradition that was about other religions. And of course, the first thing the Muslim Community Center said was, that's not really,
Yeah.
there's a fighting of us and other things. We ended up going to great courses, and we pulled out a piece that was from Heidelberg University, and they did cultural and religious interfaith. And what ended up happening is the different faith communities came when we explored that. We had about maybe 60 people involved. And then when somebody invited us over to their faith community on the first session. And so what they did is we did the lecture, and then we went and they actually invited us into their worship. So we began to build relationships back and forth with one another. The thing that I want to say is that as that happened, within the community, there were a lot of dialogues, panel discussions. But when the Tree of Life was attacked, so you guys remember that. That was right in our backyard. And we ended up coming together as an interfaith ministerium and basically had an interfaith worship and support for the Jewish community there in Monroeville. That was immensely helpful. The other piece, when the Muslim community had their mosque attack, we went over as an interfaith community, and that was with Baha'i, Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Jewish communities, several Jewish communities, Roman Catholic, Methodist, just the whole bit. Had a university been involved, if we're working for defined mediation in between that, if it's being led by one of the individual faith communities, it's kind of tough to find that balance.
Yeah.
A university
Absolutely.
setting can be a wonderful place for that. So I was really excited when I heard you guys were talking about this. But
That's great.
I'll be quiet, but there's a lot. Thank you.
So we have our clapping plant, but we also have our interfaith advocacy plant in our audience.
Yeah, and to talk about a way to build goodwill is when somebody's traumatized and
And you're there to support them.
you're there to support them and they didn't expect it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you met prejudice.
Okay, next question is, any thoughts about the growing tensions in the US over treatment of immigrants, legal and undocumented, and privileging of Christian nationalist perspectives? Also the destruction of USAID.
Yes, I do have many thoughts about that. I guess addressing USAID. I managed a project for USAID in West Africa, and so much of it was getting the University of Bamako online was the project. And so much of the discourse around the value and the work of USAID was just so completely wrong. It was, I don't know where some of that stuff came from. USAID's challenge in the face of that is they are external facing, so they haven't had to try to sell themselves or market themselves to the US, and therefore they had no foot on which to stand, to be able to address and quickly this issue. But US interests, for better or for worse, and not every project is awesome, are being advanced by USAID, and the USAID's economic and physical security is weakened by taking down USAID. And that is coming from somebody who worked in West Africa, knowing the volatility of the region and the impact USAID could have in that region. So that's kind of my thought to that. I am disconcerted when I hear, to put it lightly, that any anti-Christian bias will be rooted out in certain agencies. I worry about what that definition means and what that means for people who are of minority religions, and that's also atheists also, are going to be thrown into that potentially as well. So that worries me very much. And the state of immigration. This is very important to me. And you asked, and this is a personal question. Again, the lecture tonight is about how universities can engage with faith communities, but it's been switched a little bit to personal, so I'm giving you a personal perspective here. So I have, as I mentioned earlier, I've been in a little over 40 countries around the world. I have been mugged and robbed and cheated and lied to by people of just about every color and nationality and political persuasion that exists out there, and religion. But I have also been warmly treated, loved, cared for, humbly taught by people of every color, nationality, religion, political persuasion as well. People are people, and just because they're an immigrant does not make them any less a person than someone who is a citizen. I know many, many immigrants who have been an enormous blessing to the countries where they've gone. I have worked personally with those who are undocumented and seen the struggles that they go through to make a life for themselves, their families here and back home, and the contributions they make to our country. Yes, there are awful immigrants who come, of course. There are awful citizens who are here as well. Just as there are wonderful people who are here and wonderful immigrants who come. And just differentiating or abusing or discriminating against someone because of an immigration status, to me, it feels morally wrong, but also it's just dumb. You are doing no good for our country when you do that. And again, that's my personal opinion, and I'm happy to discuss. But I've also been an immigrant in other countries, and I feel for those who are trying to make it. You know, like I said, I've lived in France, I've lived in Tanzania, I've lived in Mali, I've lived in Australia. I wasn't citizens of those countries, and I was there trying to help them, but also help myself and my family. And I think I did, and many of them do. And so I really struggle with that.
Okay, Chris, any more questions at your end?
We are good on my end.
Okay, I've got two more here. I'm curious if you could clarify what you said at the beginning about the post-war emphasis of academic freedom and scientific autonomy, and the role of government in mediating these academic efforts to determine what is good, in quotes, for society. Is the goal of this sort of framework and whole of society approaches in general to perform that mediation because government has stopped or failed to do that? And does that create a principal agent problem?
There are like 4 questions in that one. So I guess I was assuming a knowledge base that maybe not everybody has, but post-World War II, the US government commissioned a report, the Bush report, that really said, look, continued government spending in basic research is going to be a good thing and will help our economy, not just during wartime. And so I think it was the Eisenhower administration that took that on board and continued to funnel large amounts of money to universities to conduct research. That has been an enormous benefit to our society. I would direct you to that article that Professor Allen wrote. She talks about this more in detail. But that having happened, it had some consequences, one of which she mentions in her article that I quoted, was that there began to be a bit of a disconnect between the work that we do and a recognition of the benefit that can have or the impact that can have on society. And it untethered universities from this longer, what I see as a longer tradition of community engagement and involvement in leadership. So that's kind of that point there. Now, there were some other things that. Let's look at the next question and then see if we need to get back to that.
Okay. This is the final question tonight. And how can atheists help? Peace between religions is important, even if I'm not in one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very similar to public universities being involved. I mean, public universities don't have to have a faith confession to realize that those with whom they work, the societies that they're impacting, have very strong faith components, and engaging with that and strengthening that it's smart work. Yeah, you don't have to be faith motivated to strengthen and even benefit from that kind of work. And there's lots of dialogues of which I've led and been part of, where atheists were, of course, participants in it, because you're addressing a larger issue that impacts all of us. So, yeah, I know many atheists that there's one organization called Faitheists, in which they're atheists but engage with faith communities to strengthen some of the work that they do.
Any final thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I really enjoyed being here with you. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. This is my passion. It's a passion born out of personal interest, but also I've seen the positive impacts that can happen when we work together on these issues. And so I love that I've had this opportunity to meet with you. Thank you very, very much.
Again for being here and your thoughtful questions, and hope to see you in October, right before homecoming, where we'll hopefully have a panel.